Well, milk producers are voicing support for the reintroduction of the Farm Workforce Modernization Act. The legislation focuses on broadening ag labor reform, an issue recently underscored by pandemic disruptions. Well, Alan Bjerga with the National Milk Producers Federation joins us now with the latest insight. And as always, Alan, thanks for your time today. Bring us up to speed on this legislation and what it could hold for ag labor reform.
So in the next few days, we're expecting to see the House of Representatives discussing the Farm Workforce Modernization Act. Now, we've seen this legislation before. It actually passed the House on a bipartisan basis in December of 2019. It is an attempt to modernize and update ag labor policies. You know, there hasn't been a major immigration reform bill that's passed Congress since 1986. This would be focused specifically on agriculture. And when it passed the House in 2019, it was the first piece of agricultural reform legislation and immigration policy since 1986. It was going before the Senate, momentum was building, and then, of course, COVID hit. And if it wasn't involved with the pandemic in 2020, it wasn't going to get a lot of attention in Congress. Now we're trying to get some little bit more momentum for reform on this issue. As the COVID-19 pandemic hopefully starts to ebb, we can get attention to these issues. And, of course, we're in a different environment now than we were before. There's a lot more appreciation of the value that agricultural labor shows to the economy, and I think consumers have more of a sense as far as how important the food supply and a smoothly operating food supply chain is, and the role that agricultural workers play in keeping this economy going.
Now, you guys are launching an advocacy campaign in support of the legislation. Tell us a bit about that support effort.
Yeah, so on our website, if you go to NMPF.org, it's just our acronym, NMPF.org, you'll see a little red bar where we always have sort of our latest developments coming up. And if you click on that, you'll go to a link which allows you to send a letter to your local member of Congress. If you just punch in your own zip code information, we'll figure out what congressional district you live in, and you can customize a message that will be able to tell your story and your reason why you would like to see ag labor reform pass the U.S. House of Representatives. It's going to be very important to have grassroots dairy advocacy on this issue because lawmakers listen to their constituents. And to get that sort of bipartisan support, you know, you need urban lawmakers, you need rural lawmakers, you need agricultural voices, you need consumer voices. And what we really need on this legislation is a strong bipartisan vote because that shows the Senate that it can be done and that people mean business in getting the necessary reforms needed for agricultural labor to strengthen our economy.
And Alan, before we wrap things up, of course, there's a lot of things going on in the world. A change of administration in Washington, D.C., still recovering from the pandemic around the world. What is the current atmosphere in the nation's capital city?
Well, I mean, you're seeing some things start to move, right? And this stimulus plan that the president has signed in is very popular among the general public. You know, so often there are proposals that actually have some pretty strong general public support, but because of the bipartisan, both parties bickering in Washington, D.C., you see these controversies magnified in terms of when people are trying to find resolutions to issues. You know, that's part of what makes something like immigration so hard, is there are so many constituencies that have so much emotional push for these issues. But the fact is, most people want to get something done. And maybe with something like the Farm Workforce Modernization Act, you can start getting this habit of bipartisanship built into the fabric in Washington. And gosh knows we all need that these days.
All right. Well, Alan, as always, thank you very much for your insight this morning. Alan Bjerga, he was with the National Milk Producers Federation on the phone with us today from Washington, D.C.